Everybody, to 52 Living Ideas. I am enormously honored and just delighted to have Yasuhiko Kimura here. He's an amazing person. I'm a student of history, and I know that the Eastern culture, Chinese and Japanese culture, Indian culture, and the West culture is very different from each other. And people find it difficult to actually see across these cultures. He is most unusual person I've met. I consider myself to be fortunate because I've lived half my life in one of these cultures and half my life in another. Yasuhiko has contact with all four. So I am just very excited about having this conversation. And today we are going to be talking about inner freedom and outer freedom. Okay, so that's the topic. So welcome, Yasuhiko.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes.
So Yasuhiko, let's open up the topic. What is inner freedom and what is outer freedom?
Inner freedom is the absence of compulsion, and outer freedom is the absence of coercion.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. And society will be freer and freer if there are less and less in coercion. It will be, at this moment, impossible to eliminate all of the coercion. If somebody wants to harm others, you have to stop them. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, there will be a minimum amount of coercion still needed. Inner freedom, we can be completely free from all forms of compulsion, which is actually internalized coercion. And once we are free from compulsion, we are actually free internally. When we are born into the culture, parents will tell you what to do. Mm-hmm. And as we grow older, we become more and more obliged. We have lots of obligations. And therefore, those obligations and what we have learned from our parents, external authorities, we have internalized in the form of compulsion. And so once there's a compulsion inside, you are not psychologically free. So you may be doing something compulsed or out of your freedom. And that's two different things. So inner freedom, we can be 100% free. Externally, we can get closer and closer to that level.
Wow. Oh, that's wonderful. So what I want to do is I want to have this conversation chronologically, your intellectual development, and we will go ahead and bring in this theme. We will talk about different things and we'll bring in this theme. So first thing is that you grew up in Japan.
Yes.
And you became a Zen Buddhist monk.
Yes.
At the age of 16. So please tell us about that and what did you learn as a Zen Buddhist?
I actually, at the age of 16, I had some kind of a cosmic epiphany. I was really in the place of, when teenagers, they think about life. And I was thinking about life. Mm-hmm. And come to the point of really, I didn't want to live anymore unless I have the answer to the questions. And then luckily I had some insight. And I was not able to communicate the insight I had with anybody around me. Mm-hmm. And then, but I had read some Zen scriptures before. So I started to seek Zen masters to speak with and ask questions, and also getting some kind of confirmation, that I may not be insane, but I got something. Mm-hmm. So luckily there was a huge Zen monastery near our high school. So I went there. Surprisingly, there was no one except for one monk and one master. Mm-hmm. And this young monk told me, you came to the right, you are in the right direction, but not this monastery. I will send you to my Zen master, who is about 2 hours from here, and he can guide you. So I took a train for 2 hours to go to the other Zen temple, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where my mentorship, learning, apprenticeship with the Zen master started. And by the time I became 18, I lost interest in the schooling system. So I decided to just dive into Zen and be initiated. And that's why I became Zen monk and stayed in Zen monastery about 5 years. Yes, and I got so 6 months monastic training, and 6 months I had a professor of Buddhism from a university giving me, he was a friend of my Zen master, giving me academic tutorship. So I had a meditative monastic training and then academic study of Buddhism from Chinese and Japanese literature. That's 5 years of my life. And then they sent me to India.
So before we go to India, what did you learn during these 5 years?
Yes. Most religion is based on beliefs, belief systems, you see. So Christian, you believe in something, and even Buddhist, they believe in something. Zen Buddhism is unique. It actually is based on inquiry, asking questions. So when I met my Zen master for the first time, I asked many questions. But every question I asked, he replied with another question. So Zen is unique in that sense. It is very inquiry-based spirituality. And your Zen master will never actually give you any answer. You need to really discover, find out for yourself. So he more like a direct your questioning in the right direction. That's all they do. Wow. Now, in a sense, there's similarity to Socrates because his dialogue is also based on a lot of questioning. And today, or not today, in the late 20th century, we had Krishnamurti from your country. His approach was also inquiry-based. When I came across Krishnamurti for the first time, I said, oh, this is like a contemporary Zen. Wow. He didn't prepare his audience to be able to have a discussion with him, a conversation with him. So they turned him into a kind of a guru and they tried to turn the Krishnamurti into some kind of something that he didn't want to be. But there are people like David Bohm and a few others who are thinkers. And when you read Krishnamurti and David Bohm's series of conversations, that's amazing, literature. They ask questions together. Wow. Wow. Yes. So for Western people, Krishnamurti was like a Zen master. Yeah. Without being a Zen monastery. So that is the thing, Zen, and it is a value of Zen to bring people back to this questioning. So it can also lead to be very scientific because scientists ask questions. Wow. And you see, belief system really ruins human mind. When we talk about Spinoza, we can talk about, but Spinoza has like 4 different ways of knowledge. And sometimes he only talk about 3 because the 4th one is like not even knowledge. It is like hearsay. It is belief. Some authorities say something and you believe it. No critical thinking, no asking questions. And one group of people believe in something and somebody else believe in, and they go against each other. And they don't really don't know what they actually don't know. Wow. So that to me, the eternal value of Zen Buddhism, bringing people into the space of inquiry and asking questions. Now I was very lucky to have actually encountered that. And maybe because I was asking a lot of questions myself and nobody could answer me. So questioning was like a part of me. So it was natural for me to get into Zen. At the same time, having been in that environment, I can see the value of being in that environment.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
This theme of questioning will keep coming back to, because I
Yeah.
think that's the core theme of.
You know, I say to people, answers are temporary, quest is eternal.
Yes. Beautiful, beautiful. So you went to India, and it is coincidentally you lived only a few blocks from where I used to live. So tell me, what was India like, and what did you learn from 3 years in India?
So in a way, being in a monastic environment, and although I got pretty good academic education from this professor, it was ancient Japanese and ancient Chinese. So Buddhism, and I read some books in other field, but it was a Japanese translation. So learning English and Sanskrit and Tibetan and all those languages start to open up my mind. So you see, acquiring a new language is more like really acquiring a new soul.
Mm-hmm.
And I found English to be the best language for me. You know, although my English wasn't anywhere near good as my Japanese, but I found it was a better language for me to express my thought than Japanese, because it is more logically constructed and direct, so long as you define your words initially. So that's number one. And number two, I met lots of people from all over the world, young people, my generation, a little bit older. And so interacting with, you know, Germans and French and Americans, you know, my world expanded. And of course, Indian people.
Mm-hmm.
And then also I started to study Buddhism in English and some part in Sanskrit. It gave me a different perspective. How the Buddhism is held in the Indian culture is different from the way Buddhism is held in Japan or China. Also, let's see. And I read lots of books, you know, with my dictionary on the one hand, you know, and in English. I spent hours. Only entertainment I had was going to see Bollywood movies. I didn't know the language, but it is very simply constructed. You know exactly what is going on.
Yes.
Beautiful music and dancing. It was so cheerful, and otherwise I spent my time reading, and not only ancient Indian, Upanishads, but also contemporary teachers, Krishnamurti included, and I also came across Georgy Gurdjieff
Mm-hmm.
and Peter Uspensky and Gurdjieff's other students. So my world expanded tremendously.
Mm-hmm.
I visited Osho's ashram.
Mm-hmm.
I attended Krishnamurti lectures. I visited Madras and Calcutta, Varanasi, all those places in India. And it was just an eye-opening experience. It was, I ceased to be Japanese.
Yeah, no, that's a huge thing. I mean, as an immigrant, I know personally what it means to go to another culture.
Mm-hmm.
Because what happens is that most of us grow in a certain culture and never really immerse themselves in another culture. So
Mm-hmm.
they take a whole bunch of things about our own culture as given. They say,
Mm-hmm.
this is what it means to be human.
Mm-hmm.
When you actually go to a culture which is very different from yours,
Mm-hmm.
you realize how many variations that are possible to
Mm-hmm.
a human being.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're honest, you can say, okay, what do I think about this?
Mm-hmm.
And then it opens up this entire universe.
Yes. And one of the simplest and at the same time profound way to learn culture is eat their food, the way they cook and the way they eat. So in India, I use my hands and experience this whole thing of being with people, sitting on the floor, which we do in Japan too, but then sitting on the floor, and then using your hands to eat.
Yes.
And some are extremely hot, and experience this whole thing. I attended many funerals in India, how they see death. You know, I'm a kind of a clean freak. I'm a very clean person.
Oh, that must have been very hard in India.
Yes. So for 3 years of being in India, I have to set that aside. I did my best to be clean and never, you know, and when I went to Nepal, I got hepatitis because they didn't know how to boil water. It was hot, but it was boiled. And so I got hepatitis. But anyway, all those experiences. And actually, speaking of Nepal, to change my visa or something, I went to Nepal and became friend with this director of the National Archives, and moved from hotel to his house. Then somebody stole everything, my passport, my money, everything. So I kind of had to stay there for a number of months. So I went to Pokhara, Annapurna and Machaputre. And at that time I had this book, Zen Fresh, Zen Born. And in that there is a 112 method of meditation, not Zen meditation. It is come from the India. It's not really Tibetan either. It is, you know, and I practiced that meditation 112 in the Himalaya mountains, except for two are what is called a tantric sect, and I didn't have any partner. I couldn't do that. But otherwise, it's 120 meditations every day. I meditated this in the Himalayas. There was eagles flying, and tigers roam around at night. So they told me I have to be in certain time, otherwise, you know, I'll be in danger. So I sat in particular spot, very close to eagles flying around. Beautiful, beautiful, you know, birds. And I meditated and then practiced one by one. It started with Vipassana meditation and then go all the way.
Wow.
So that memory is part of the experience of being in India. It was more Nepal, but still it was amazing. And Nepali people are different from Indian people. They're different kind of culture, you know? Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
It brings back memories.
Yeah.
It brings back memories. I have read that book, Zen Flesh and Zen Bone.
Yeah.
I have been to Himalayas, and I remember the eagles flying.
Yes.
In the middle of just tremendous amount of wind, they are able to just tweak their little feathers in order to remain in place whenever they need to.
You know, the first few days I was a little bit concerned because they're very close, but they completely ignored me. Completely, they didn't even pay any attention whatsoever.
Wonderful.
That's a very interesting experience. I never saw tigers.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
It was good.
Yes. Yasuhiko, there's just so many fascinating things to follow up on. So one of the things I want to start with is the language.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of Julian Jaynes. You are also a big fan of Julian Jaynes. And language is critical. Now, the question is, I was reading Marshall McLuhan, and he was making observations about the difference between alphabetical language, like English, and languages like Chinese or Japanese, which use kind of pictogram, or I don't know what exactly the name for it is. So you are very observant about yourself. So what is it like kind of reading Japanese? What was the experience like moving to a language like English?
I don't know if anybody said this to you, but you know, there are three kinds of languages in terms of how it is read. So Japanese and Chinese goes from top to bottom and right to left. Imagine that your eyes moves like this. So there's a kinetic component to reading. And English and German, of course, go left to right and then go down. And Urdu or Arabic go from right to left and go down.
Yep.
And brain and eye are connected, left brain and right. So I think there's something about this that somebody should explore. There's something interesting because Urdu and Arabic, which goes from right to left, tend to be extremely poetic. The one who goes left to right tend to be more logical. And the one that goes from this way is somewhere in between.
Oh, that's really fascinating.
Yeah, so, just sound and visual, and also the way we read, already probably we are using our brain in a different way. And the world, before the world, there's sound. Yes?
Yes.
And in the beginning was vibrations, which is sound. And sound became words. And so how those vibrations became words. There are 6,000 languages existing on this planet today. 6,000. So, and complex words and sentences and grammars that constitute each of the 6,000 languages are different. So when you master the second, third, and fourth languages, one of my mentors knew 22 languages. Something happened to your consciousness. We are talking about polymath. So you become, genuinely multilingual. And the way you start to think and relate to the universe will be enriched.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Like I know two languages really well. I mean, my standard is that you should be able to read literature in the language, and you have to be able to write anything, any complex thought in that language.
Yes.
I know two languages like that really well, which is Marathi, which is I grew up speaking. I did not know English till I was in about 7th grade, and then I know English. And when I came to America, I switched completely to English. I was doing that most of the time. I was in love with America. I wanted to just, do that. So I hardly spoke Marathi. Once, after many years, almost 10 years, I was going back to India. And I said, okay, let me see what my state of Marathi is. Okay. I think about psychology and philosophy all the time, and I write extensively. So I write in English. So I said, okay, today, I remember it was a Sunday. I said, today I'm going to write the same things, but in Marathi.
Interesting.
And Yasuhiko, it was a very interesting experience, because what happens is that each language is different.
Yes.
The concepts are different. And so it's kind of like you're trying to grasp the same thing, one with the right hand and one with the left hand. So the grip is slightly different. And as you adjust the grip in order to get to the meaning, you actually understand a lot more. Yes.
You see, so languages, in one sense, you can say the set of distinctions. So the famous story about, Eskimos and the Indians living in the north, they have different 27, actually a friend told me it is 60 some distinctions of snow. And color. You see, rainbow, how many colors rainbow has? Of course, infinite number. It is a continuum. And you make some distinctions. So 7 6,000 languages that we have. Those are 6,000 different sets of distinctions of reality. And they never are exactly the same. You know, I have done a translation of Lao Tzu, Chinese classic, and I have been translating Shobo Genzo, Dogen Zenji's, magnum opus. I did publish Lao Tzu. I never published Dogen. If you go to my website, you see 3, which is satisfactory for me, so I put it there. Because I can never satisfy myself with translation because it is not same. You can never really convey, because you see, sound is an essential component of language. And sound is that which changes the state of being. When you say something, like a Beethoven, you're talking about Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, ba-ba-ba-bam, that's when your state of being just completely shift there.
Yes.
You know, Beethoven, you cannot listen to Beethoven doing something else. Beethoven said, listen to me. Otherwise, get out.
Yes.
Yes. So you listen. Already there's a sound create a state of being. And so 6 different set of distinctions of sounds and visual images, colors. One whole reality is divided into 6,000 different kinds of distinctions. It is quite amazing. So translation is an impossible task. That's why I kind of enjoy it. It's more like my hobby, you know, and then try to do as much as possible to be able to get closer and closer. And Dogen Zenji, Zen Master Dogen, is an amazing writer. Every piece of his writing is poetic.
Wow.
And it's impossible to translate. At the same time, because it is impossible, it's a challenge. So how I can translate this feeling of this in ancient Japanese? You know, Master Dogen was born 1200 and died in 1253. So he is a contemporary Rumi, almost identical, exact period of time. And Rumi was also a great poet and scholar. Dogen was the same way. So an ancient language, ancient Japanese is entirely different from contemporary Japanese. It's more like studying Latin or Greek. It is that different. So the beautiful sound and the different distinctions he uses, and he come up with new words, invent new words, like Buckminster Fuller in that sense. And so until the end of my life, I'll enjoy translating, but I will be never satisfied because it is an impossible task to do it.
Absolutely. You know? Wonderful. Yeah. Wonderful. So next, I want to move to the West.
Okay.
First, let's move intellectually.
Yes.
You talked about Spinoza last time, just briefly, and the nature of his thought. So can you talk a little bit about what you like about Spinoza, and then maybe we can relate it to Lao Tzu or Indian thought, please?
Wow, that's a rich subject, huh?
Yes.
Let's see. You know, on my 14th birthday, my English teacher gave me a book, The Outsider, by Colin Wilson, in Japanese translation, famous translator, Yasuo Nakamura. And his implied message to me was, I am the outsider and never try to fit in too much. That was his message. And it took some time before I realized I'm kind of an outsider, even when I was a child. One element of my affinity to Spinoza is he was an outsider.
Yes.
His family was Jewish, living in Portugal, converted into Catholicism, but not really. And then toward the end of, I think, 16th century, his family moved to Holland and reconverted to Judaism, but not exactly. So his family and his community has been outsider, number one. Number two, he was a real original independent thinker. So he went to, a regular school, Judaic education, and he was supposed to become a rabbi. Actually, he was a star student, but being an original thinker, he started to disagree with Judaism. So at the age of 24, he was excommunicated. So, he had never went back to any academic, positions. So he was outside the community of outsiders, and he was outside of that community. Nobody. So I admire him for having developed his philosophy entirely through his thinking and rethinking, although he was influenced by many scholars and philosophers. I like original thinkers, and he is one of those people. That's number one. Number two, his philosophy is, secondly, I'm not like you, expert in mathematics, but when I was growing up, I loved math, especially geometry. And I think one of the greatest memories, most joyful memories of my childhood was solving geometry problems. I got the university textbook on geometry. And so it teaches you, some theory, the axioms and theorems, and then you apply that one. This thick. It was my joyful moment, being alone, nobody's bothering me, I just do this. So geometry was really my love. And as you know, Spinoza's, writing is geometrical. And the way he expounded his thought geometrically kind of corresponded with my maybe my mental structure. There's an abduction, induction, and deduction. We all use those three reasonings, but I am more deductive person than abductive or inductive. And Spinoza was also that way. If I can compare myself with such a genius, but mental tendencies like that. So that's number two. Number three, his philosophy itself. It has so much in common with Eastern thinking. So he kind of defines God as this infinite, eternal substance whose essence is existence, or you can say being. And it is equivalent to nature, but nature not in the most like a nature with divinity, nature with spirituality. Giordano Bruno had this distinction between how do you call that? Nature as creation and nature as created. There's a Latin word for this. I don't want to pronounce it because I don't know. And Spinoza took that from Bruno. So there's a creativity and creative process, and then created, and they are together in nature. And it is infinite and eternal. And that is, you can say, the definition of Brahman, no doubt. So and then there is a lawfulness to the God's unfoldment, same as Brahman, and same as Tao. So Spinoza's philosophy kind of brings a Western philosophy, make a bridge to Indic way of thinking, Brahmanic way of thinking, and then Eastern, in the sense of Asian, Taoist influenced mode of thinking, Lao Tzu's Tao. And as you know, Zen Buddhism is like a marriage between Tao and Buddha, yes? Lao Tzu and Buddha came together and then became a Zen kind of thing. So there's a lot of Tao in Zen Buddhism. So the cosmologically, they come together. And also, today, nobody can really take seriously this anthropomorphic or anthropocentric God. But
go ahead.
We can take seriously Spinoza's God, Hindu Brahman, and Chinese Tao, because it is nature which contains a dimension of spirituality and creativity. So you can move away from pure materialism, and in the one sense, you become an atheistic, in the sense of you are no longer a monotheist, believing in some kind of a anthropomorphic God, transcendental to the universe, because divinity is immanent. Best way to characterize Spinoza's mode of thinking is immanentist. It is not even pantheism. And it is because it is also within.
Yes.
So divinity is immanent, which is equal to Brahman, Tao, nature, universe, and cosmos, and is infinite and eternal. And bringing Bruno, whose thought had tremendous influence on Spinoza, it's also isotropic. This infinite universe, everywhere you go, it's basically the same, homogeneous, and acentric or omnicentric. There is no particular center to this universe. You can't find a center for infinite space anyway. So very contemporary. That's why Einstein said his God is Spinoza's God.
Yes. And I would say even founding fathers, when you look at their concept, that is very similar, right?
Exactly. So when they said the law of nature and nature's God, that is exactly what Spinoza meant. Now, Spinoza was an excommunicated outsider philosopher. So anybody who says, I agree with Spinoza, they got kicked out of society. He was like a dangerous outcast. But secretly, people actually admire him. And most of the British philosophers who had an influence over founding fathers of the United States, they are actually, if you eliminate all those circumlocutions and the indirect difference, they're all the follower of Spinoza. The most famous one is, of course, John Locke. But John Locke was born in the same year as Spinoza, 1632. He lived longer. Spinoza died, unfortunately, younger, like 45 years old. Imagine somebody came up with that much philosophy by the time he became 45. She became 45. He died of, I think, consumption, tuberculosis.
Wow.
Yeah, untimely. But anyway, so John Locke was actually older, 3 months older than Spinoza, yes? And John Locke escaped England and lived in Holland. At that time, the man studied Spinoza significantly. Come back to England, start to write books. when you take away all those unnecessary stuff from John Locke's writing, it is almost identical to Spinoza.
Wow. Wow. Excellent. I want to go now to America, but I want to hit one point before that.
Yes.
One point that you made. The first point you made about Spinoza, about him being an outsider. I would add to that, he's also an autodidact.
Oh, no question.
He's studying by himself, he's learning by himself, and he's outside of any system. So he's not beholden to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is a huge, huge deal. I mean,
Yes.
you are certainly like that. And that is, I think, when you look, what shall I say? I think it's a primary requirement of inner freedom in some ways. It's
No
the
question.
best context.
I think schools
Mm-hmm.
and parents, their only job is to make their kids autodidact.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nice.
If they can make their kids autodidact, and it is actually, if people grow up to be who they are, we are naturally autodidactic.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, auto, self learning, and schools goes against that mode.
Yes.
And it is impossible to actually become autodidact if you want to be a good student.
Yes. Yes.
Well, if you are extremely intelligent, you can do both.
Yeah.
Maybe like you you can be both, but most people.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I want to follow up with, you said that there are 3 books that you really, when you came to America, there are 3 books that influenced you. And the first one, I want to connect it to Julian Jaynes, because Julian Jaynes worked in academia most of his life.
Yes.
But what he produced was completely original. Completely original.
Yes.
And one of the things, one of my friends, he was the last student of Julian Jaynes. So on his deathbed, pretty much, in the last week of his life, they spent an entire day together. And he said, my worst mistake was to remain within academia. Mm-hmm. Because though from 1973 to I think 1990 or 93 or something like that, 20 years, he could not do what he could have done. So let's talk about Julian Jaynes. But I think that book has been tremendously influential for me. What tell me about Julian Jaynes. What did you get?
First of all, I thought his bicameral hypothesis was so extremely interesting. And the most maybe practical application of his discovery or theory is vestige of bicameral mind. Mm-hmm. So based on his theory, what we call consciousness is a recent development, no more than 3,000 years. Before, humans had a different modality of consciousness or mind, which he called bicameral mind, bicameral. Mm-hmm. And they heard the voice, literally. Right hemisphere is speaking to the left hemisphere. It was not like and that was amazingly unique interpretation of ancient literature. Mm-hmm. I don't know current status of his theory. I read him a long time ago, and I really never really went back to it. But I was so impressed with his theory.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've been doing meetups on Julian Jaynes. We've done almost 12, almost a dozen meetups on different.
Next time I would like to join and learn more about what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
But anyway, so it was then a new mode of consciousness evolved. He didn't call it he called it consciousness for the time for the first time came into existence, which because bicameral mode of mind or consciousness, he didn't use this word consciousness, but the bicameral mind was not able to process and deal with complexity of society that were developing. And this new mode of consciousness had, had unique features. One is a speciation of time, and notion of I as analog, me as a metaphor, and compatibilization of diverse experience into unified whole. It's a long time ago. I remember he mentioning like 5, so I mentioned 4. Maybe you know more.
Wonderful.
So,
yeah. So I think that was that was one
here somewhere.
Yep. The second one that you mentioned was Buckminster Fuller.
Yes.
So tell me about Bucky.
If I have to pick one book, which is the most original I have ever read, I would have to pick his Synergetics.
Wow. Wow.
You know, most books, I don't know if I read other books. Actually, people think I read other books. I may read other books, but I don't. It's more like I'm thinking, and then check what other people said and add a little bit, change a little bit. So the thinking process is always like leading me, asking questions and developing my thought, and then see what other people said and just pick up. And so, you know, I haven't read all those books. Those are books I have opened. Some books I read 3 or 4 times, but some are, you know, not many. Anyway, so Buckminster Fuller, I never had any thought about something like that before when I opened the book.
Wow.
And it was 1983, July. I landed in San Francisco on June 27th of 1983. And it was June. So, you know, I thought it would be California, June, it must be very warm. So I was t-shirts and jeans. And it was so cold. I have to go somewhere else. So my purpose was to go to San Francisco, but that's how I moved to Los Angeles immediately. And my girlfriend, whom I met in San Francisco, her parents had a house in Holmby Hills, which is near Beverly Hills. And then so I stayed in their home, and then she took me around. And we went to Beverly Hills. And there's a Beverly Drive, and there's a bookstore called Hunter's Bookstore. It is no longer there, at least as far as I know. So let's go into, you know, in Beverly Hills, all those fashions, and one bookstore there is interesting. We go into, you know, when I entered, it was in the corner. I entered the bookstore. It's like there was an energy coming from one section. So I go, and then this book, Synergetics. I didn't even know what it meant. And it's like a
wow.
And then my girlfriend told me he is a famous inventor, and so on and so forth. So I bought the book. Oh my God, that was an amazing book. It was like my English was not still, I'm still learning English, so I needed vocabulary is immense, and you know, one sentence is so long, you know, it's like so because of the intellectual challenge, it was even better, you know, and then, wow, that was an amazing book. And what I learned, I mean, when you read that kind of book, it becomes part of your consciousness and mind. And I'm not an inventor. And I have not used his engineering part of his theory. But you see, subtitle of his book is the exploration into the geometry of thinking. Actually, that was the one that actually caught my eyes. So the geometry of thinking, and I think I have absorbed that geometry of thinking, which is expressed in the form of synergy and synergetics. And so that's maybe, I have learned to think systemically, holistically, in a very precise way. You know, Eastern way of thinking is holistic, but it is not, doesn't have precision.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and Buckminster Fuller's way of thinking really gives you a real precision at the same time. And so Buckminster Fuller was an amazing man, probably one of the greatest minds ever lived, at least in the 20th century. And his accomplishment is like forever. I mean, other books he wrote were also amazing, you know. Critical Path was also an interesting book. Learned history from a different perspective, you know.
Wonderful. I just want to follow up on one point that you made, the fact that you don't read, you know, you're thinking and you're reading as a side. I mean, the way I think about it is that I'm mostly writing. I read in order to write. Writing is my way of thinking because it's a way of putting my thought down. I can self-reflect on it. I can make it more precise. So what I'm primarily doing is always writing. And I read in order to feed into the writing process.
Similar. We are very similar that way. Yes, yes, absolutely. Yes. And sometimes, you know, good books, you read one sentence and you say, wow. And you just spend another few hours thinking about it.
Yeah, exactly.
If I want to read fast, I can read. But, you know, the books, things you read fast are, you know, newspapers.
Right.
But when you want to really dwell on some deep thought, you want to find a book that really invites you into that mode, and those books you can't read too fast.
Exactly. Now, we were talking about inner freedom and outer freedom, and you made some amazing comments about the founding fathers and outer freedom. What do you think is the contribution of the founding fathers to making outer freedoms possible in the world?
Yes. Last time we spoke, what made me interested in United States and studying the founding document is because in the East, we have emphasized on the inner freedom, but the kind of liberty that existed in the United States never existed in the East in the scale. And the contribution of founding fathers is, number one, first of all, many of them are autodidact and polymathic. And
I'm sorry to interrupt. I have to tell you a little anecdote. This is John F. Kennedy. He was hosting a bunch of Nobel laureates at the White House for dinner. And the statement he made was that this is the most amazing collection of minds that White House has ever seen in this dining room, except when Jefferson was dining alone.
Famous statement. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Maybe he was the most scholarly person. Yeah. Of all them. Thomas Paine was like me. You know, he thought more than he read. But anyway, so they studied and read lots of books, and they brought at least 3,000 years of, you know, philosophical thinking to create the fundamental intellectual and philosophical framework to develop free nation. So you can see Greek and Roman thinking, Cicero and Seneca, and then all those people. Of course, Epicurus and Aristotle, all the way, and of course Spinoza, John Locke, and many of those British philosophers. And they have somehow invented new philosophical framework upon which to build free nation. And to me, that is the greatest contribution. In a way, they were a little ahead of their time, or maybe still ahead of their time, because they wanted to build a foundation so they can make it more free, but instead it actually became less and less free.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, the way they always said it, republic if you can keep it.
Exactly. And I don't think Americans were able to keep it in a, not only in the original form, but they were not able to develop it. In my view, one of the problems that they had is, I think they needed to develop an annotation for Declaration of Independence and Constitution. Although Federalist Papers are like annotation in one sense, but if they really gave the academic foundation upon which they build their thought. So all men are created equal. They meant equal in one way. Most people don't understand what they meant. Now, equality is one of the most misunderstood and abused concepts in philosophy and law. And so if they explain it, what do they mean by equal? And nobody's equal, everybody is different. What do you mean by equal? But at that time, they knew exactly what they meant. It comes from, John Locke and then go back to Spinoza and all the way. So there's a clear meaning to the equality, but somehow they didn't give the explanation for this. So, everybody is a product of their time. So there's something called background of obviousness in communication theory. So what I think is obvious to me is not necessarily obvious to you. That's a cultural thing. When you are in a communication with people from different culture, first you have to establish the same background of obviousness in order for you to be able to communicate. And so what was obvious to them then is no longer obvious to us today. But if they have explained it, we would have had a better way of understanding founding document and then kept evolution going. That's number one. Number two, do you know that most of the founding fathers were accused of being atheists?
I didn't know that.
Most of them. At one time or other. Of course, Thomas Paine and Thomas Young, those people are always accused of atheists. But Jefferson, Franklin, and because of that reason, because average Americans are not at their level, they must speak the language. So although founding document was spoken in their own language, in communication, they created the diluted version of speaking about the principles to be able to communicate and to be able to be assimilated and to be able to be so that people can agree with what they're doing. But founding fathers are actually intellectually, philosophically more minority than majority. And in the process, they were ahead of their time. And for that reason, they communicated in a way that can be assimilated by others. That compromise became more and more compromised. And what happened today? Yeah. So, yeah.
Wow, I think that is very interesting observation.
But can I just go back to one thing about Spinoza?
Anytime you want. Yeah.
Because I was thinking about it, I couldn't share. So Spinoza's substance and God of the founding fathers is almost identical to what we call nature.
Yes.
But a nature that has a dimension of divinity, spirituality. And Chinese and Indians developed this basic idea into a different direction from Spinoza. And Chinese philosophy or cosmology, you have famous yin and yang. Yes?
Yes.
What is it? Now, they saw universe, basic substance of the universe and nature, as a duality of matter and motion. You can never separate matter and motion. So Spinoza's substance, God, has matter aspect and motion aspect. And they all go together. Matter is mother. Motion has pattern, father. Yin and yang. And because it is inseparable, there is motion in matter and matter in motion. Matter aspect is more feminine, and motion aspect is more masculine in a sense, but that is their fundamental definition. Now, as you know, Spinoza had this basically extension, which is matter, and thought, parallelism, monistic parallelism of body and mind, or extension and thought. Same as matter and motion. And the motion we can call mentation. And that is a part of spirit aspect of it. And throughout the whole universe, this infinite universe, there's a matter aspect and motion aspect. And throughout the whole universe evolution, many integration took place all the way to humans, where you have extremely complex matter motion called brain and body. It has both sides. And this mentation becomes so defined that we actually use language and then we speak. It is so complex and so defined that you can actually develop mathematics to describe the universe within which we exist. So this motion aspect is wave, and the matter aspect is, of course, particle. Every particle has a motion aspect of it. And actually, you can clearly explain this so-called duality, quantum duality, using this kind of thinking. So Spinoza was also at the beginning of scientific, revolution. Let's see. Spinoza died in 1677, and Newton was born in 1642. So they're overlapping, yes. 46, 42, 46, don't quote me, but around that time. So there's overlap. So he was never be a scientist, but he had this scientific element to his thinking, and that developed into Western scientific revolution. Now we can actually bring back those Eastern mode of thinking and maybe reframe physics and science again. Same is true with Brahmanic thinking. In the Brahmins, they talk about the trillions of span of time, but also trillions units of time. They say like in 1 second there will be 44 trillion times go up. So 22 trillion times showing up and 22 trillion now disappear. That sounds like a Planck's constant. So it is, and that will, and then that continues. Eternity is right there, void, and that is also a motion, yes? Primordial motion. So when we bring kind of integrate this mode of thinking, philosophical thinking, East and West, especially Eastern thinking, and reframe modern science. And when scientists become again natural philosophers, there may be new development.
Wow.
What do you think? Because you are a scientist.
No, I this is very profound. This is very profound. And what happens is that the science has gone, taken some aspect of science and ran with it. Like Newton was a spectacular success. And then everybody thought everything is now billiard balls, and they're trying to kind of work everything on it. So they miss a whole bunch. Now, the interesting thing is that original thinkers don't do that. Like Newton did not do that.
No, you guys, I just want to say that. Yes.
Yeah. So he thought that he had not done much. His whole thing was, even at the end of his life, he was saying, I don't know how other people see me, but as for myself, I seem to have been just a boy playing on the seashore, and I've discovered some seashells more shinier than the others.
As you know, Newton was a deeply religious person. And he spent more time studying Bible and alchemy than actually studying physics. You know that, yes?
Yes, absolutely.
It's a very famous story. And gravity. You see, he needed to explain that God is always present and interacting with this physical universe. For him, gravity is more like a continuous intervention with the universe. And Buckminster Fuller called gravity love. You know that, yes?
Yeah.
Love is gravity. Gravity is love. I think in volume 2, he talks about, volume 2, he gets a little bit more in that dimension. And he gravity is love is another name for gravity.
Let me ask
Yes.
this question.
Yes.
Because we are kind of talking about that general area. What is, go ahead, you are about to say something.
No, just go with
okay.
Give you a joke, but it's okay.
Okay. What is the integration between religion and science? Religion has been around for a long time. It has provided a base for humankind for a long time. Science is amazing. It's the thing on which we are actually building a lot of things. What is the integration between religion and science?
You see, this question is asked today. It was not asked at the time of Newton or Galileo. And because we divided them.
Yes.
Now we have to put it back together. And you see, it is, so you have a science in the sense of scientific theory. And you have a religion in the sense of religious scriptures or philosophy. But where they come from is the human intelligence and human consciousness and the human mind. And autodidactic and polymathic mind, which we all have, do not think in compartmentalized way. So the question that we are asking is in a way inadequate to answer this particular question you are asking. So it is really, we need to bring back our consciousness into the holistic mode of being and follow the question, follow the wonderment that we have toward the mystery of universe. Then some people who have the mind like Newton, the expression of the exploration will be more mathematical and scientific. But some people's outcome may be like a poetry. And many people will be creating music.
Yes.
And actually, as you know, music and mathematics, in a way, the two sides of the same vibration that permeate the universe. Yes?
Yes.
You know, since we're talking about Taoism, so you have I Ching and Tao Te Ching.
Mm-hmm.
The I Ching has yin and yang,
Mm-hmm.
yes and no, actually no and yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then 2 to the 6 power of 6, 64. Yes?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Tao Te Ching is yes, no, and maybe.
Hmm.
And 3 goes into 4, so 3 to the power of 4, 81.
Hmm. Hmm.
Okay? And then 6 is divided into 3 and 3, earth and heaven. And this 6 and 6 divided into, again, earth and heaven. So they saw this universe. One is one movement of the universe come from above, one come from the below.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is not only multi-dimensional, but it has a level to our reality in nature.
Hmm.
And 2 to 6, 12. 3 to 4, 12.
Hmm.
So they had mathematically, they had dual decimal system.
Mm-hmm.
So they thought of the universe numerically using not the digital, but duodecimal
Mm-hmm.
in the base of 12.
Yes.
And binary is the essence of this, but there's a 3, 6, and 9.
Mm-hmm.
So as Nikola Tesla said, if you understand 3, 6, and 9, you understand the universe and vibration.
Mm-hmm.
They had the basic idea about this 5,000 years ago.
Wow.
So I Ching and Tao Te Ching is a scientific mathematical aspect of their philosophy and cosmology. And there's a reason why there's 81 verses and 64 verses in the I Ching and 81 verses in Tao Te Ching. And each number, 1 chapter, the verse 1, verse 2, it is not a coincidence. There's a number there, numerical system. So they actually had the sense of numbers and ratios. So cosmological aspect of this is expressed through numbers, which also goes back to Hebrew, scriptures.
Mm-hmm.
Because each Hebrew character has numbers. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So when we begin to expand, being autodidactically and polymathically expand our curiosity and understanding of universe infinitely, eternally, time-wise,
Mm-hmm.
we can come to create a new kind of civilization, new kind of knowledge together.
Wow.
Wow. And now talking about in and out of freedom. Along with Spinoza, I don't believe in free will.
Mm-hmm.
There's no such thing as free will. People don't have free will. And that is not to be free. So, when you have a choice, and you don't know which one to choose, you're confused. If you are free from that confusion, you do what naturally follows from your being. There's a concept called choiceless choice.
Mm-hmm.
The state of freedom is being in the state of choiceless choice. That you are who you are, and you are being authentic. And authentic Sri Kant, at this moment in the whole cosmic coordinate system has no choice but to do this, because that's who you are, and that's freedom.
Mm-hmm.
It is not which you want to go. No. If you know who you are, and if you are being in tune with the infinity, there's no question what you are going to do this moment. You don't think decide with the head. So the element of compulsion, element of having external element in your thought, having different personalities and egos within your consciousness. And then one ego is telling you go this way, another ego is telling you this way, and then you have to choose, and then you are totally confused. And after you make a decision, you say, oh, I made a wrong decision. That is not freedom. Freedom is unity of self with the universe. And you do what you have to do, in the sense that it is the only way you are being who you are. So when people come to my seminar called the Passion Workshop, we start from this obligation. People are obliged to do something. You go back, then go into the what do you want to do? People don't know what they want to do, but eventually they become clear about what they want to do. Then you go into this moment of clarity, where you know who you are. Therefore, the only commitment that you can make is to be who you are. Be authentic and be in integrity with who you are. Then you begin to do what you have to do, given who you are, and that is exactly what you love to do. So it is like an obligation, wanting, commitment, unity, integrity, authenticity, loving to do, and doing what you have to do. It is no longer the same have to, obligation to have to. The entire different. This obligation comes from outside, and confusion. There it is a complete unity. So inner freedom is each person's responsibility. To be responsible is to be at cause of your life, yes? So being free is at cause of your life. And you are at one with yourself and at one with the universe, and you're authentic. That means a fundamental virtue. And when you become authentic with yourself, then what happens? You continue to realize yourself. That is the meaning of pursuit of happiness, pursuit of self-realization through being virtuous, through being authentic. So your happiness may appear to be different from mine, because you're a different human being, but the essence of it is self-realization, following the virtue of self-authenticity. In that way, that we are saying, yeah.
Wow. Yasuhiko, this is fantastic. This is just beautiful. Folks, I've put the website of Yasuhiko in the email, in the chat. I want to give a few minutes for you guys to ask questions. So if you have questions, go ahead and type exclamation point. It's going to be questions only, and try to keep them brief so we can get to as many questions as possible. The rules are as follows. Keep on topic, be brief, speak your mind. And let's begin with Angela and Judith. Angela.
Hi, Yasuhiko. Good to see you.
Hi, Angela.
Hi.
Good to see
You said early in the session that belief systems ruin the human mind. Can you say a little bit more about that, please?
When somebody gives you some kind of doctrine, you accept it by self. You are outsourcing your thinking to others. So, belief come to you. In the beginning, that's all you have in your mind, because your parents indoctrinate you and the teachers. But if you maintain your thinking, you rethink what you have been given. re-examine. That is a critical thinking. You rethink. And you may agree completely, but it is no longer a belief in the sense of the external authority giving you some kind of dogma. It is processed through your thinking process. And now you know that is the case. You know, so your mother will say, you know, don't touch a hot stove. And then you re-examine, touch it, it's hot. Don't do that. But anyway, you know, simple. So you want to examine, you want to ask questions. And the questioning develops people's mind. It is not the memorizing answers. Yeah. And that's how you become autodidactic and polymathic. Because our mind is a unified whole. It is not compartmentalized. We're talking about this, you know, so there are 6,000 languages, yes? There are 8,000 academic disciplines today. Specialization to that degree. But we are not designed that way.
Exactly. Next up is going to be Judith, Joe, Jean, and Nari. Judith.
Hi. Thank you, Yasuhiko. You mentioned that equality was the most misunderstood and misused word or idea, that the founding fathers had something else in mind, that they explained in a way common people would understand. So I was wondering if you would expand on that. Because I agree that equality can never exist, but how should we think about that?
Well, this is you know, one subject we can speak 90 minutes in the next conversation. But basically, what they meant is like you and I are equal as human beings in the sense that, you know, we are different from dogs and monkeys. That's one sense. So we are all humans, which means kings and queens and beggars are the same, equal as a human species. That's one element of this equality. So it is not like a uniformity or identity equality. We belong to the same species. And as human beings, we are equal. That's number one. Number two, in the process of creation, we are all created by our parents having a sexual intercourse. None of us was born from immaculate conception. We are born, we are created in accordance with law of nature, equally. Number three, once we live in society, we are equal under the law. You know, one group of people and another group of people, they need to follow the same law. Those are the basic three elements of equality. And we can really go deep into this. And that's what they meant. And it was commonsensical for those people who were writing this. So they didn't really pay too much attention. In my view, anyway. You know, they are very thoughtful people, but I think it was so obvious to them, they didn't really need to clarify. But that's what it meant. You know, we are living in democratic society, but we have to transport ourselves into the 18th century. King and queen had a different right to the commoners. They are not equal. So it was a revolutionary idea. We are the same as kings. They are no different from us. Same humans, under the same law of nature and law of society. Nobody has any privileged place in the scheme of nature and scheme of society. That was their point.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Joe, Jean, and Nari. Joe.
I'm sorry, I was out there for a minute. Wonderful presentation. Thank you for joining us. You spoke early in the talk about the idea of freedom from being coerced. Is there a society that you've lived in that is more free than others, that provides for more autonomy than others?
United States.
Really? Wow. It's interesting because a lot of people in the United States would not, I don't feel like would say that.
Yeah. I came here in 1980s. And I think today, less free than 40 years ago. except for the last 4 years.
Thank you. Next up is Jean. Jean, go ahead.
Yes, great presentation. My question is, it seems the founding father, they all very thoughtful people and independent thinker. And so they create this great country. But today, I think the main challenge is the leader in politician. I think everybody need to be philosopher first to be able to lead or continue what the founding fathers in mind. I think that's the main problem we have. And it seems I involved the politics a little bit. I realized it seems because the system, they don't want anybody who have too much strong thinking. I wonder it's similar like you have a company, the founding company, they're all very creative people. Then you find some manager to manage it later, so they don't want it to change. I wonder that's the reason why it's working this way. So it doesn't matter. You have the most crazy leader, the country is still the same. So I wonder, what do you think about that?
You know, Shrikant knows about this much more than I do, but you know, and Hindu has the concept of Trimurti. Creation of the universe goes through the period of creation, Brahma, and then maintenance, Vishnu, and then Shiva, destruction. So if you continue to do this, universe become eternally regenerative. And so initially there is a creation, creativity. Then maintenance come in. And then they somehow don't want to have that destruction part of it, creative destruction. If there is no creative destruction, it will be destroyed, but not regenerated. So in the most fundamental sense, you know, what happened to the United States are very common. Or companies, creative people create something. Then managers come in and they want to manage it. But then they get power and everything. They do not want to create anything because they get so much value out of this, and they continue. They become bigger and bigger, and that creative destruction and renewal part has been completely ignored. And as a result, United States is dying. So you are right about this. And first of all the founding fathers, they did the politics on the side. Nobody was a politician. Because they needed to create a new country and achieve freedom for society, they did this together. But you know, they had about 156 was number of founding fathers. Founding father in the sense of official and unofficial, medical doctors, and scientists. You know, Thomas Paine was an engineer. He built this iron bridge for the first time in human history on the side. So it was his passion, but he did the politics on the side. So everybody has something else. They had a successful career and talent, and they did politics together. Today, people go into politics. They stay in Congress forever. Some of those people looks like ancient human beings. 50 years in politics does not make any sense. They should just, you know, come and do, you know, a few years and then leave and go back to, you know, your own career. And then there is a unionized, you know, deep state. Long time ago, every time a new president came in, everybody got fired, and he brought in entire new stuff. But now, same group of people stay in bureaucracy, and then politicians change. At least president change. And now they have more power than the president. So the system is really corrupt and actually dysfunctional. And you're right about that, you know. And so what we can do, we want to make sure that every politician leave within 1 or 2 terms. And bureaucracy also has to have a time limit. So it's like people used to go to army for 4 years. It's like going to the government and going to politics become like a civic duty. So you do that for 4 years and 6 years, and then go back to your work. Nobody will stay in the government more than 8 years maximum. Maybe 4 years would be nice.
Yeah, absolutely. They were founding fathers were different people, like Washington or Jefferson.
Yeah.
Washington wanted to be at Mount Vernon, kicking and screaming. They said, okay, I have to do this, so I'll be a president.
Yeah.
For a short time until I can get back now. Same thing with, so it's a very different attitude.
Yeah.
Next question is Nari.
はじめまして、Kumura-san. Kumura Sensei. Nice to meet you. Thank you so much for this talk. I thought it's been really kind of enlightening and kind of shifting my thinking, because the whole idea of not having free will just kind of goes counter to my personal beliefs. But the way that you explained it makes perfect sense. And I kind of want to dig into that. You say, like, when we're like aligned with our internal values and like authentically sitting in that point, is when we don't have to worry about free will, because we don't have to make a choice. It happens naturally. But unfortunately, we're not in a situation necessarily, or a society where we can live in that moment or in that space continuously. So how do we kind of develop that authenticity? And then at the same time, is there perhaps a point or perhaps a need for some sort of coercion in society for us to kind of grow and develop into better people? Like our parents have to coerce us to like share our toys when we're children, or learn how to share. Like if we're left to doing it naturally, we might be like, yeah, this is all of mine. I'm not gonna, nobody else gets to touch my stuff, sort of thing.
The person or consciousness in you that asks that question, the questioner, that is a fundamental dimension of who you are. So we want to really acknowledge that part of ourselves that is asking authentic questions. Only authentic self asks authentic questions. So, I would like you to really acknowledge yourself and, appreciate that part of you and nurture that part of you that asking those questions. It is far more important than any kind of answer that I can give you. And we have this format of somebody appearing to be an authority answering questions, but it is not my intention, and that's not Shrikan's intention. So, there's no obligation whatsoever to agree with anything I say. Actually, disagreement is a beginning of thought. In order for you to be able to disagree with somebody, you should be really thinking, yes. So, what happened is today I shared with you something which was not what your belief system, and you begin to rethink. And right now you are agreeing with more with me than your previous belief. That is a thinking process. It is so important. You're a young woman. It is so important to follow this movement of your thought, the consciousness and mind. So your authentic self is at work right now, asking those questions. And so I don't know if I want to answer your questions, because I would like you to just stay with that you. And now you encounter many situations in life where you have to think about this. and let's talk again next time and give me your report. It's far more valuable than me just saying something. Do you understand? Do you agree?
I understand, and yeah, I'm gonna keep you to that.
Yeah.
We meet.
Yeah.
Let's have a discussion.
Yes. And that questioner is the one that is going to also get an answer. Yes.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Yasuhiko, how are you doing on time? Are you able to take a few more questions or not?
Sure.
You're okay? Okay.
Yes.
Very good. So next up is Jyoti, Jeff, and Aver. Jyoti.
Thank you for your presentation. It was excellent. In the first part of the presentation, you had mentioned that Buddhism is different in India from China and Japan. Could you just shed a light on what we mean by that and how and why they are different?
Okay. So Buddhism has 2,500 years of history since the Buddha. This whole universe, when you say Buddhism, there's actually this whole universe of thought, practices. And one school of Buddhism looks or sounds more like Christianity, and another school of Buddhism looks like Brahmanism. So it is when we say Buddhism, it is a huge universe, number one. Okay. Hinduism has additional 2,500 years of history. Buddha is like a reformer. He showed up much later than the original, Vedanta. So in the context of Hinduism, Buddhism is nothing but one branch of thought. But in China and Japan, Buddhism is the universe, whereas the Hindu perspective, Buddhism is one of the solar systems in the galaxy of Hinduism. And it is an interesting perspective. That's the first thing I realized. And okay, Buddhism, and then you can find many Hindu teachings. That all sounds like Buddhism. And also, Buddhist influenced Vedanta scholars, especially Mahayana Buddhism. So there's a lot of interaction. And the greatest Hindu sage, scholar, philosopher, Shankara, Charya is name master kind of thing. It is we don't know when he was actually he lived. Maybe 8th century or 9th century, and he was a brilliant man. He died at the age of 33, just like Jesus Christ. But he actually debated a Buddhist and won the debate and eliminated the Buddhists from India. But in the process of debating, he had studied a lot of Mahayana Buddhist scriptures. So he absorbed many of the Buddhist ideas already within himself. And being smarter than everybody else, he was able to debate them. Yes. So we want to think about Buddhism or Hinduism or Christianity. It is a universe. And there are many different philosophies, practices. And even within the Zen Buddhist, in Japan, there are 2 schools at this moment. In the past, there were 3. In India, in China, there has been more. And so what's the difference? It is one Zen master has one particular character and another one, and then just a different way of talking, but somehow a different emphasis on something. That's all. So, so maybe I don't know if I answered your question, but that is my original impression. Buddhism is one part of Hinduism.
Wonderful. Thank you. Next up is going to be Jeff. Jeff, go ahead.
Thank you so much for this time. Really very provoked a lot of reflection and thought. It seems to me that one of the most important things in life is the ongoing conversation that's happening between I and me, the internal ongoing conversation, listening and talking to myself. And I'm wondering, because I'm a big fan of questions as well, if there are any in particular questions you would suggest that we might ask ourselves to generate the best actions for ourselves and in our relationships with others.
What is a question that I have never asked before, the answering of which might transform my life? That is the question.
Beautiful. Thank you. Next up is Ever and Mike. Ever.
Hi, and thank you for the talk. It's been very interesting. I just need to clarify a point you made earlier. You spoke about becoming free by letting go of compassion. Now, I can understand letting go of sympathy or pity.
No, let
Sorry for my
Yasuhiko.
English, because I have an accent. Compulsion, not compassion. Compulsion. Coercion and compulsion.
Compulsion. Yeah.
Compulsion. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Next up is Mike. Mike, what's your question? Very brief. Mike, you need to unmute yourself.
Okay, very brief. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today. I'm impressed. I'm also a big fan of questions. I've always believed that if you ask the right questions, you'll get the right answers. You mentioned Socratic method and the Zen method of questioning. You also, I was somewhat surprised you included Gurdjieff in that equation and his seeker viewpoint. Can you say a few sentences or one sentence on each differentiating the three methods?
Socratic dialogue has really no end. It is a process, inquiring. It does not have it is an open-ended inquiry, joint inquiry. That's how I understand. That's how I practice with my student. And then that also involves asking questions about the assumptions upon which your question is asked. In order for somebody to ask any questions, you need to have some assumptions to begin with. We'll say, who am I? Well, already you are using those words. So each word has a meaning. That meaning has an assumption underneath. So Socratic dialogue also, at least the way I practice it, it goes into that dimension of examining our own assumptions and deconstructing our assumptions. But there's no end. It is a process, conversation, dialogue. Zen inquiry has actually an end. And the end is enlightenment. And enlightenment in the sense that, so in the process of a Socratic dialogue, you may have an epiphany, but Zen actually has a design to that end. So master would ask the question that answering of which will lead you to that answer. Secondly, Socratic dialogue, not irrational. It is actually in the Greek tradition of pursuing our reason. Zen questions will more focus on the paradoxes. It is not irrational, but it is not rational either. It is more like trans-rational. They ask questions that are paradoxical, and answering of which will break you from this conditioned mode of logical thinking. So it is designed to really break the paradigm of thinking intentionally. So it has a design for break of a paradigm and break of logic as accepted by the person who is involved in that koan, Zen koan inquiry. Gurdjieff was entirely different in the sense that I'm sure he asked a lot of questions. I have never been with him. Gurdjieff is, his value is that he has studied ancient spiritual traditions, great many of them, and integrated it within him and creatively applied and taught to a group of people, each of whom took part of what Gurujev knew. And so he contemporarized ancient teachings in a very original and creative way. So that's one thing I, on my own, came to conclude when I was a Buddhist monk and priest. The ancient teachings are designed for ancient mind mentality, mindset. And even within Japan, the Japanese who lived in the 12th century had a different mentality from the Japanese who lived in 20th century or 21st century. And in studying Zen, I needed to adjust myself to that mentality. And I realized we need a new mode of teaching, which is appropriate for the 21st and 21st century minds. And I found that in many people, but originally in Gurujev, he has really transformed the ancient teaching into the teaching for the 20th and 21st century humans. And that, to me, the greatest contribution he has made. And I think he was like a super genius. I mean, this man's capacity was just remarkable.
Wonderful. So we got last 3 questions. They are by Kevin, Rupali, and Anne. Folks, keep your questions very brief. Kevin.
Yes, thank you. This morning we have topic talk about the kawaii, especially one beautiful word, cuteness. So, and the conversation, I found both way, like yin and yang. And here's, you also mentioned there's no center of a universe. However, in reality, a practice from individual to community, leaders, religion, culture, we implicitly like a center based. Some kind of like exclusive based. My question is, do you think when we thinking things, build a product or beliefs, it's embedded flaw in it?
Okay, 2 things. So I used to use the term idiosphere, sphere of ideas and ideation. And human idiosphere has been concentric. So there's an authority, center of ideas, ideologies, and people came around and basically believed in whatever that is, you know, whatever it is that this authority is imparting. It is a bicameral mode of mentality. You believe in external authority and somebody is a leader in thought and people follow him. So it is a concentric mode of idiosphere. And so omnicentric means we each, ideally, in the end, becomes the center of ideation, generator of ideas. So that is a strange attraction of evolution of human consciousness, going that direction. Now, in the social gatherings and creating organizations, obviously you need a center. Today we are having this conversation. Shrikant and I are basically 2, centers, and then people are, around this. Not because we are better or know anything, we have Shrikant organized this, and I am the guest, so we have that kind of organization. None of us is above anybody. So when you have an organization, you need to have a hierarchical structure to make that organization most functional. The problem is that that center become permanent and the organization become permanent. People come together to organize something, to do something. But when eventually the survival of the organization becomes more important than accomplishing the goals for which the organization has been created to begin with. So that is a problem. So if we have a omnicentric or at least polycentric idiosphere, and people begin to become the one of the centers of omnicentricity, organizational center will arise, but dissolves when the purpose is fulfilled. Like a US president, every 4 years, somebody shows up.
Yeah.
So that is the view we can have. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. So last two questions, Rupali followed by Anne. Rupali.
Thank you. This is a very, very interesting conversation. I wanted to kind of ask about the job of the educators and parents that you mentioned before, of letting the children be autodidactic. And there is some level of information that needs to be taught to children, and then some that has to be discovered. And how do you see that mode of education being imparted?
I think a few things. Number one, mother and parents and teachers want to really cherish the questions they're asking. You want to encourage them and empower them to ask questions. Today's education is based on answers, not the questions. And actually, teachers and parents suppress kids' questions and monopolize questions and answers. And as a result, children's curiosity is suppressed. So it is extremely important. It is true. There is no such thing as stupid questions. So we want to really empower them. That's number one. Number two, we want to encourage children to be who they are. Obviously, in society, we need to acquire some skills and become somebody in some professions, in the context of one becoming oneself. Today, I become a doctor, I become a scientist, I become this and this. That becomes the main thing, and they ignore becoming who one is. So no two doctors are alike if they are allowed to be who they are. So education needs to be more individualized, not homogenized. Number three, in this sense, I think basic curriculum has to be changed. Then you can actually convince the kids, well, you can pursue anything you want to study, but you need to be able to read. And today, knowing 2 or 3 languages is like required almost. So study language. Like Shrikant, I started studying English in 7th grade by teachers who didn't know English much. So I have to restudy English once I got to India. But anyway, so learning language is important. Second, they need to study mathematics because you need to have basic mathematical knowledge to be able to understand science and technology. Not only that, mathematics teach people thinking, rational thinking. So, and then there are basic things people need to study, and then you can tell them. Everything else you can study whatever you want. Basic things like basic law. You need to know the Constitution of the United States to be you can disagree, but you have to know what it is. So basic law, and living in this society, you need to know basic accounting, how to support yourself, which was entirely missing in my education, accounting. So those basic things we need to know, yes? So you can tell them language, mathematics, basic law, basic accounting. those are everybody has to study. You don't need to be to know mathematics at the level that Shrikant knows or mathematician knows, but you need to know basic. Can you look at the differential calculus equation that you know what it means? Probably up to the level of a high school mathematics. I think everybody should be able to basically master. So there are things they have to study. And if kid likes to do a art, obviously you want to encourage them, you know. So basic curriculum will change, and the rest will be just their interest.
Wonderful. Last question is from Anne. Anne.
Yes, thank you very much. I've enjoyed listening to the past hour or so. My lingering question is with regard to belief, however. I know from a personal perspective, it's my beliefs that give me the greatest sense of personal peace and integrity and coherency. Now, that's not to gainsay, you know, the compelling benefits of human curiosity, but I can't just discount belief as being bad for the human spirit. So I'm wondering about your thoughts in that regard.
Yes. The greatest American philosopher, many people think he is, Charles Sanders Peirce, uses the word belief. And I use it in the same way. So when you hear somebody say something and accept without rethinking, examining it, that's when the belief becomes a poisonous. When you hear and then re-examine it, critically thinking through your critical thinking, and you come to a point of, I don't have any more question about this particular belief's validity. That's a different kind of believing than accepting external authority, whatever he or she says at face value. That's number one. So it is how you acquire belief, accepting dogma or rethinking, re-examining, and come to the point of no more question. And if you come to the point of no more question at the moment, then that belief is essential. Second, what we call belief is, in the most fundamental sense, is an assumption. You assume it. And some assumptions are re-examined to the point that you don't really ask any more question about it. So second attitude is you take the belief as the best possible assumption I have come to so far. And you engage in your thinking, exploration, inquiry. Then what you call belief, what I call assumption, what Peirce calls belief, conclusion, that is an assumption about which one has no more question. Then it is essential for humans to have it in order for us to think.
Wonderful. Yasuhiko, this was incredible. And I have more questions now than I started out with.
That's the point. That's the point.
We will have to yeah, exactly. We'll have to do this again soon.
Yes.
So thank you very much. I'm really honored. It is just sheer delight and just so much, so thought-provoking. Really, really appreciate that. And there is just so much commonality of approaches that we have. That it's just an incredible conversation, and looks like everybody here enjoyed it immensely. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.